is the DeFi Decoded podcast by 9 Point Partners. The ideas and opinions expressed in this podcast should not be taken as investment advice. Always consult with your financial advisor before investing.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of DeFi Decoded. It is just me this week. Alex is playing hooky on some sort of vacation or something. Who knows what the guy's up to? But I am here with Jake, who is one of the co-founders of SX Network, a project that we're somewhat familiar with on this podcast. And we're going to be talking about a ton of things today, just going on what he's seen in the DeFi space. What does he think about sort of the new L2s that are coming online, all the new different blockchains, and just talk about different things that he's seen. So, Jake, I think this is your third time on the podcast. Welcome.
Yes, it is. Okay, great. Thank you. I think the first thing is probably, did you see that a judge ruled that NBA Top Shots might be deemed a security?
Yeah, I saw that. That was pretty insane. I saw so that tweet just came through literally 2 hours ago.
Yeah.
And I think the headline was a bit misleading because from what I can see, the judge didn't rule that they're securities. They just allowed the case to go forward. But yeah, that'd be pretty insane if Top Shots were considered security. So for people that don't know, like NBA Top Shots are essentially a digital collectible, and they were sold by this company called Dapper Labs as an NFT. So people could go and buy essentially moments or like short highlights of big players. And then like you could buy them in packs and then you could trade them on Dapper's site. And it became huge. And Dapper ended up raising, I think, like a $500 million funding round based on the success. Yeah, I mean, have you bought any of these Top Shots before, Jake?
I've not, but I do think the headline panicked some people for sure. I think people are now like instantly online all saying that, oh, well, now will all NFTs be deemed securities, which the judge actually said that is not the case. And I read the docs, and there was one comment in particular that did stand out. The fact that these NBA Top Shots cannot be transferred off of the Flow blockchain, and the fact that Flow is a private blockchain. He basically states in the filing that if these could be transferred to Ethereum or to other chains, then it would not rely on Dapper Labs' continued success of its private chain. So it was a very clear indication that there are huge advantages to being on a public chain.
Yeah, Dapper Labs, so their Flow blockchain, it's kind of a weird L1. You can't really bridge funds on and off. And you have to the only way you can take funds off of the blockchain is through their fiat off ramp, which you have to be, requires multiple levels of KYC. So it's not really clear why there's a blockchain involved, given, I mean, one of the huge benefits.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, Flow trades at like a $5 billion valuation. So maybe the answer is more obvious than I'm implying, but yeah, it's kind of interesting. I mean, one thing that was also interesting, I don't know if you saw, OpenSea just delisted Rihanna's NFT collection because
cool.
Yeah, because I mean, I think the argument there is a bit more straightforward. It's because the NFT collection actually shares profits with there's like a royalty stream attached. What's interesting with the NBA Top Shot is that there's no royalties at all. Like I mean, these things really should have no value.
Well, it could have value in the same way that, an NBA card does, or any sort of like collectible good, like a Pokemon card, for example.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I think that's what's kind of surprising about this is that it like the only value is from its value as a collectible. Like you said, there's no, like, you can't run a DCF on an NBA Top Shot and say, hey, this thing's going to yield me X amount of income therefore it's got Y value. It literally is just it's just like it's usually like an 8-second highlight clip.
Yeah.
It's
I
sort
think
of
though the main standpoint was that if Dapper Labs shut down, these all have no value because it can't be transferred off of the site. And they basically cannot be accessed if Dapper Labs and the Flow blockchain cease to exist. So that wasn't like the first time I've heard that take, and it will be very interesting to see where things go from here.
Yeah, and I think the key thing there is like you said, that decentralization does have a lot of benefits for users because things are a lot more secure, and also just the way regulators see it as well, right? Because regulators, I mean, I guess this isn't really a regulator, this is more a lawsuit, but if people are relying entirely on you for the platform to operate, then that takes away a lot of the sort of consumer protection aspects of securities laws, and so it becomes a lot more gray. And as a project, it opens you up to more risks as well, obviously. From what I can see, though, I looking at some of the big crypto lawyers on the space, they think the case isn't that, like, they're not really ringing alarm bells on this case, to be honest with you. I've seen a couple of them come out and say they're not too worried about it, just kind of like their initial take. Mm-hmm. And it's sort of been blown out of proportion from the headline, just because it's not actually a judge declaring that these are securities. He's just not dismissing the case out of hand.
Yes.
So we'll see what happens there. One thing I did want to talk about also is you're sort of my go-to expert on perps. We've covered perps a bit on this podcast. Essentially what perps are, they allow you to, they're almost like futures trading, but they're called perps because they stand for perpetual futures, essentially. So you never have to roll them over. There's no sort of settlement date, which makes them, gives them a much better UX for retail traders compared to sort of traditional futures, which you have to roll over every month. And they've blown up in crypto, just given obviously the huge demand for speculation in the crypto world. And there's been, I mean, I'm seeing now up to 1,000x perps, so you can go 1,000x long.
Oh, wow. I've not seen past 100.
Yeah. But anyway, so there's been sort of a perp war brewing in the DeFi space. Do you want to just talk a little bit about that, and what are some of the projects you're excited about?
Yeah, for sure. And I think too, this perp war, or the hype for on-chain perps, came after FTX got shut down and everything happened there, because Binance and FTX were kind of the only two spots to trade perps. And from my experience, I thought that FTX did have a very good UI and experience, obviously, until everything crashed. But on chain, the big players, DYDX and GMX, they both have, I think, garnered all of the eyes, and rightfully so. But there's one project on Polygon called Gains. The symbol is GNS. I think they've built a fantastic app. The product is super slick, easy to use. And they kind of take a unique model where instead of LPs providing capital for people to trade against on each pair, for example, if people want to go long and short ETH on GMX, people have to LP on that ETH pair. Well, Gains takes the approach that there's a single community-owned fund that's actually owned by the holders of Gains that everyone trades against. And that allows them to offer very good depth and tight spreads across a number of pairs, when on these other perp exchanges, they're very deep on ETH, Bitcoin, and maybe a couple other coins, but they don't have the same breadth that the Gains model allows for. And the crazy thing about Gains is they've just exploded in popularity. They're now making over $1 million a week in fees. Just absolutely staggering growth. They also went multi-chain recently. They were on Polygon at the start, and they just launched on Arbitrum, and that saw them almost 3x their volume. So Andrew, actually on that, what are your thoughts on going multi-chain and for apps who do that? I think you're on mute, Andrew.
Yeah, so I think I'm a big fan of going multi-chain just because I think it's much better UX for consumers in the sense that if you have assets, the easiest way for a consumer to use your app is if it's on pretty much every chain, because then they don't have to bridge over and they can just use you from the security of their favorite chain. So some people love Avalanche, some people love Ethereum. I mean, there's all these different chains. The only problem with going multi-chain historically is that you fragment the supply side. So I think, like, if you think of all these things as like two-sided marketplaces, the demand side is the consumer, the supply side is the market maker, liquidity provider, whatever. By going multi-chain, you increase the demand side, obviously, and you lower the friction for them to access the site, but you also fragment the supply side, which to me just clearly makes the product worse as well. So I think the thing I'm really excited about is multi-chain app chains, which is sort of a weird thing to say because in some ways they're sort of contradictory, but having an app chain where all of the liquidity, and maybe it's not an app chain, it's more just like one home chain where all the liquidity resides, and then having a way where you still get the benefits of distribution from going multi-chain by allowing customers to access that liquidity pool from whatever chain they want. So I think that's going to be a huge unlock. There's some interesting startups working on this. Socket is one. Sealer Network, which is actually the bridge we use. They've actually built this functionality into their bridge as well. But I think there still needs to be some work done there just because like bridging is expensive. So if you have to bridge every single time on every single transaction, I'm not sure if that'll be feasible. But yeah, so I think I'm very bullish multi-chain, I guess. It's also interesting too, because it seems like it's very hit or miss. So sometimes dApps will go multi-chain and they'll get no traction on that specific chain. But then sometimes you'll see an app launch on a new chain and it just explodes, like GNS.
Yes, I've actually seen that too. I think from what I've seen is when apps go on a very established chain, it's very hard to get traction if you're not the first. But if it's a brand new chain and you're an early app there, I think people just want things to do on that chain and you'll get great advertising from the team. We actually experienced that, I'd say, a bit at the start when we moved from Ethereum to Polygon, and we're so early there. But I think now it would be very tough to expand onto a PSC or a Polygon just because they're so established as chains.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think like one thing that we've also seen with Arbitrum specifically is they haven't launched the Arbit token yet. And so everyone assumes that they're going to do some sort of airdrop to people that use the chain. And so people are desperately looking for dApps on the chain to use purely so that they also qualify for this sort of hypothetical future airdrop. It's also a really good growth hack. I mean, I think a lot more chains should do this. They should launch without the token first, which seems kind of weird, I guess, because in a way the chain is just going to be, unless you're like a true L2, you're going to be pretty centralized, but you create so much hype around the future hypothetical airdrop that the
actual airdrop is always going to be a letdown, but the potential of an airdrop, because it could be massive, is always going to be higher than the actual airdrop.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, I still haven't seen an airdrop from a huge chain or a huge project where it's been unprofitable to be like an airdrop farmer. It seems to always be relatively profitable. Like for like the huge projects, you know what I mean? The ones that you know coming out of the gate are going to have multi-billion-dollar valuations. So yeah, I mean, also with that said, people also game these airdrops too. So there's not all these sort of systems in place to find people who are trying to just like game the airdrop and ban them. So, but yeah, it's been definitely a bit crazy. Are there any chains sort of popping up recently that, or L2s? Like, have you been playing around with the Arbitrum or Optimisms of the world? I mean, there's other chains too.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I've spent some time on Arbitrum, and it is just very fast. It feels the exact same as Ethereum, but obviously just much cheaper. Polygon, we've spent a ton of time on. So like that that experience, everyone is very kind of familiar with. I think long term, all these EVM chains, they feel quite similar. All these L2s, I think the only way that they can end up being different is the apps on them. And that is how they will have to compete. Because from, if I'm on Arbitrum, Optimism, BSC, Polygon, the user experience is very similar. It's more what experiences are offered on that chain.
Yeah. I mean, I think and that kind of fits into the whole thesis of going back to my whole app chain thing, which I'm kind of like an old man yelling at the sky at this point. I talk about it every week. I'm sure people are pretty bored of it now, but I just think that the next generation of L1s, because the application layer is so important, rather than trying to sort of boil the ocean by being a generic one size fits all L1, chains will focus on just dominating a specific niche. Because like you said, at the end of the day, the applications that you can use are the most important thing. And given the sort of saturation we're seeing with all these different L1s, just like generalized L1s, I think we'll see a lot more specialization.
So actually on the dApp chain thesis, do you still believe that they have to be public and part of the EVM kind of world to be able to bridge and connect to easily? Or is it kind of okay to have a private chain like Flow, which I would argue is a dApp chain or an app chain, basically for NBA Top Shots currently?
Yeah, I think it's probably too early to tell. I think for now, there's huge benefits to being an EVM. It's just easy. I would also say most chains need sort of core, we'll call them core dApps. So for example, every chain needs a DEX. I'm pretty much convinced at this point that you can't really have a chain without a DEX.
Well, until it's solved that people can bridge and DEX simultaneously, which I know there's a ton of teams on that right now, where if I'm, on Polygon and I plan to swap ETH to DAI, that I will get the highest rate across all the EVM chains.
Yeah, I'm not I don't know. I think we haven't seen that yet, right? So I'm not convinced.
No, we've not yet, but I believe it is going to come.
Right. Yeah, I think so. It's interesting to see. I mean, I don't know. I still think, okay, we haven't seen that yet. And if we get into a world where liquidity is fully cross-chain and cheaper to use, so the way that would work is the liquidity is so big on these central hubs that it's cheaper to use cross-chain liquidity than it is to bridge, right?
And that would depend on the size of the swap too.
Yeah, exactly. So I think so even with that, I still think no matter what, small swaps will almost always be better done through the local DEX. It's almost like countries. I'm trying to figure out an analogy, but if you want to do a huge transaction, you use a US multinational bank or whatever. But then if you're just taking $100 out, you can just go to the airport currency dealer and just get destroyed by the fees there. You know what I mean? It's at the end of the day, it doesn't, it's just easier to use the local option, the easier, locally native DEX for small transactions, even if the overall percentage is still relatively high. So I think with that being said, if you need to have a local DEX and maybe a local lending pool and all that type of stuff, then it is way easier to be EVM compatible, because then it's really easy for people to just fork a DEX or whatever and launch it on your chain, or for a project to launch their dApp on your chain too. So I think from that standpoint, until we get fully cross-chain liquidity and lending and all that type of stuff, and maybe if we do have that, it won't matter. We'll still always, EVM will always be a benefit just in terms of being able to launch your own like dApps and forks and stuff like that.
Yeah, so I actually see the value of being part of EVM. Just the fact that I think it's going to become super easy for users to bridge between all these chains. And I think the end state is going to be if the user might not even know what chain they are on. They just might be on an app, on a game, buying an NFT from a single UI, and they won't know what chain they're paying on the back end. And the way I kind of see it is I see EVM as this planet, and every country in it are these EVM chains. And Ethereum is like the US, it's just the massive dominant chain, but all these highly specific kind of app chains or smaller nations are appearing. And well, you might travel to X place to do sports betting, or you might do a swap, you might do a transaction on a certain chain, you might go somewhere for culture to buy an NFT. But if you're not in that EVM world, you're on a totally different planet. And you're not kind of part of this global economy, I think, that the EVM network gives. So I'm actually very bearish on kind of the private chains like Flow. And I don't think I've seen a clear competitor, I think, that is prepared to challenge ETH in the EVM world.
Yeah, I'm just looking up. I'm not actually sure if Flow is EVM compatible or not, but it is definitely private. Yeah, it's not compatible with EVM. Yeah, so so that's I mean, that's pretty stupid actually that it's not. So yeah, I don't really know. I don't know why they made that decision, to be honest with you.
I just think the tooling is so great. The fact that I can have the same account address, the same wallet, the same stable coins, the same experience in all of these chains within the EVM world, it makes onboarding and also for app developers as well so much easier.
Yeah, exactly. It's literally 100x easier to do any integration, just with like bridging and all these different things, and like obviously, like you said, the wallet. You don't have to create your own wallet from scratch. People can just use MetaMask or Magic or whatnot. So, I mean, that's like a huge argument against Solana. Obviously, Solana is not EVM compatible. I actually think they're trying to build some sort of EVM compatible.
Layer on top. I think that's more for the code though, because I think they still won't support kind of MetaMask and all that tooling. So it is, in my mind, a different planet. But they could still have multiple subnets or chains or whatever model they decide to build. And I think that is a strong kind of competitor to EVM. But I think right now, Ethereum, Polygon, and that whole space just has a massive head start.
Yeah. And also, I think it's not even just a massive head start. It's like to me, it's like an exponentially growing head start. Because they just keep getting more and more layer twos. Like I think at this point, let me just quickly look up something. Yeah, so there's actually a site called L2Beat, which records all the different layer twos. We're now up to 26 layer twos on top of Ethereum.
Wow,
which is just
amazing.
Yeah, that's just insane. Like that doesn't even make sense.
But if the app chain does play out, there's going to be hundreds.
Yeah, that's the thing, right? And I think another thing too that'll be interesting to see is, I mean, both of us were talking to the Cosmos founder, and they're talking a lot about like they're trying to make it easier and easier for people to just hook into sort of the shared security of Cosmos, which will make it way easier to spin up your own app chain. So, and they're like essentially betting pretty big as well on this idea that there's essentially going to be hundreds and hundreds of different app chains. And when we talk to people who are like in the video game industry who are trying to build games for blockchains, they either use Polygon or they're building their own chain. And I think a lot of the projects that build on Polygon will eventually, if they get big, they'll switch over to their own chain just because I mean, a video game, it's just crazy how many transactions it would require.
Yeah,
So
it is a ton for sure. And
yeah.
actually, speaking of Polygon, they've had some great growth as of late, but they did have some bad news on the week that I think they had to let go about 20% of their staff. Did you hear that?
Yeah, it's kind of crazy timing because we actually talked to Hamza, head of their DeFi team, DeFi OG Hamza. I mean, they let go 100 people, which was 20% of their global workforce, which is pretty crazy. That means they had 500 people on their team. I mean, they also put out something saying they had $250 million in the bank. So clearly they're not. I mean, they raised a $450 million round last year. So that would sort of imply that they spent 200 mil last year.
At least, right? Because you'd have to assume that they had some in the bank before. So they did have a high burn for sure. I actually saw as well, they did say that they had 1.9 billion Matic coins as well, which is about $2.5 billion right now. But, projects don't want to tap into that in terms of having to sell down to pay cost. But the one thing I would say is that 10% of people that they laid off, 20%, that would only equate to about 10 to 15 million a year in cost.
Yeah. Is that right? Yeah, I guess 100 people at like 100 grand a year, essentially.
Yeah, that's what I assumed. Just napkin. So they will have to cut their burn across other aspects as well.
Yeah, definitely. Because that does imply with 500 people, and obviously we're just putting in 100 grand, maybe it's 200 grand, but it's still only 50 to 100 million dollars, probably closer to $50 million a year in salaries. So, I mean, they also they're a very aggressive BD team.
They are the partnership machines. Polygon has one of the best BD teams I've ever seen. Sandeep and Hamza are just absolute killers. Like, it seems every week there's a new Polygon project coming out or partnership. So
yeah, they're definitely machines. So they may have spent a good amount of money there too. So that's actually easier to sort of cut, obviously, in terms of but I mean, at the same time, if you have $2.5 billion of Matic, you're not. And also, Matic token has been way outperforming.
It's gone on a tear to start the year, almost up I think over 100% on the year.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's probably one of the best performers in the top 100, maybe like top 5, and that's no surprise to us. I mean, we've been pretty relentlessly saying Matic and Polygon are just by far the best. In our view, the best scalability solution within Ethereum. So yeah, I'm not too worried about that. Though it looks like the token did fall a little bit off the news from what I can see. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. These projects are huge. I think one thing people are a little bit worried about with just generalized L1s is value capture. So the value capture from L1s is quite low. Polygon has millions of addresses, so essentially millions of quote unquote users that have used the system or the blockchain, but their sort of transaction fee revenue is still relatively small. It's measured in I think it's a couple $1 million a year. Maybe it's actually up to $10 million a year. I'll get the exact stat, which is actually quite low because Gains, for example, is making $1 million a week with 400 or 500 traders. Whereas Polygon has millions of users and has, relatively low value capture. So I think part of this also is just people are currently are just a little bit bearish on some L1's value capture.
Yeah, for sure. And then one thing has to correct there is Gains has had about 2,000 people make trades over the past month. But yeah, it is insane that Polygon does not capture more value, but it is kind of, a long-term play that the fees will be turned on and kind of exponential at a certain point.
Yeah, exactly. I'm actually just looking it up right now. It looks like I'm just looking it up right now. It looks like Polygon makes $5 million a month. So that's actually a lot higher than I expected. That's
Okay. Yeah.
60 million a year. Oh no, yeah. That's 60 million a year. Wow. I mean, that's with 275,000 daily
And
active
is
users.
that all spent to burn Matic?
Yeah, I think it's I'm not sure if all the fee revenues used. I think some of it goes to validators as staking rewards.
Okay.
Yeah. But either way, I mean, it's the same thing, right?
Yeah.
It's contributing to the security budget, as we call it. The tokenomics. So yeah, I mean, it is interesting. What is really interesting too is like some chains have literally no value capture. So I mean, Polkadot, which is I think like a $7 billion value. Actually, no, yeah, $8.5 billion valuation. It made 45K in fees last month, which is crazy. Goes to show you there's a lot of hype on some projects versus others. Polkadot obviously has some very innovative tech, but
yeah, for sure.
It is interesting. Like L1s, they either seem to mint money or they make essentially zero. Like there's almost no in between. There's very few. Like Polygon is maybe like the one like middle tier project that, middle tier revenue capture that I've seen where.
And are they like the number 3 chain or are they top 5?
Yeah, so let me just quickly look this up. So within the blockchain sphere, they're number 2 in revenue over the last 30 days. So there's Ethereum at 135 million.
Yeah.
Then Polygon, then BNB at 2 million. Again, Token Terminal has sort of different definitions. They have fees and do
they not count Bitcoin in this or no?
Well, no, Bitcoin doesn't have any revenue, right? I guess it does have revenue because of the transaction fee. Yeah. So Bitcoin is quite low. Okay, one sec. It's saying $0 for revenue. That doesn't really make sense. Oh, actually, it makes sense actually because $0 of the revenue goes to holders of BTC. Yeah. Like if you hold BTC, there's no fees, there's no fee accrual, right? So that actually does make sense. So Bitcoin's generated $13.6 million in transaction fees over the last month, but $0 of
all of that goes to miners.
Yeah. And so, I mean, outside of the top, really, there's Ethereum and then there's everyone else. If you just look at the list.
Yeah.
But even outside of the top 5, I mean, you're like Optimism is 200K a month, which is obviously amazing. But for a project that I think has a $11 billion fully diluted market cap.
It's great to see that SX will be in the top 10 right away.
Yeah, exactly. We'll definitely have SX definitely has what I think is more sustainable sort of tokenomics. At the end of the day, you need, unless you're pure proof of work, which comes with its own set of challenges in terms of keeping the chain sort of sustainable long term, and obviously the environmental impacts and all that type of stuff. So I think for the most part, most people everyone's kind of agreed that you need to be POS for you to be kind of a smart contract chain. And so at the end of the day, like you can't just subsidize your security with token inflation forever. Eventually the system has to become sustainable. And the only way you can do that is if the chain has value capture. And so that's why sort of this tokenomics, it's really important, not just from like an investing standpoint, but it's actually really important to the sort of fundamental security of the chain. And so in a weird way, the value capture of the chain directly impacts the sort of UX of for the user. So anyways, this has been an amazing episode. Thanks again for coming on, Jake. We'll have to do it again.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, for sure. And I believe Alex is also off next week as well. So we'll have one more week of just me flying solo. I'm hoping to get on another amazing guest to talk about the sort of landscape of crypto right now. We do seem to be in sort of a mid bull run. Is it a bear trap or a bull trap? Who knows? You'll have to tune in to next week to find out. Thanks again, Jake. And thanks to the audience. We'll see you next week.
The information contained herein does not constitute an offer or solicitation by anyone in the United States or in any other jurisdiction in which such an offer or solicitation is not authorized, or to any person to whom it is unlawful to make such an offer or solicitation. Prospective investors who are not residents in Canada should contact their financial advisor to determine whether securities of the funds may be lawfully sold in their jurisdiction.